Hello, good morning everybody. In this video we are going to make an active ability for our log-like character. He will be able to unleash a powerful attack, but he will have to wait a few seconds before using it again. The first thing we see if we play the roguelike is that the game crashes. It seems that with the 3.4 update we cannot use Room as a class name anymore, because now there is a Godot class with the same name. To fix it, we only need to change the name to, for example, Dungeon Room. Also, there is a bug in the change scene function of the send transistor script. We call the function to change the scene inside an assert. It will work while we debug the game, but in the release version, all the asserts will be removed. So the line will disappear and the player will not be able to change the scenes. To fix it, just store the return value of the change_send function in a variable and use the assert with this variable. This way, the line we use to change the scenes will remain in the release version of the game. With that fixed, we can start implementing the active ability. The first step is to create an input action. So go to Project Settings, Input Map, and add a new action. I name it UI Active Ability, but you can choose the name you want. Now add an input to the action. I add the right mouse button. Therefore, the player will use the active ability when I press that button. I want to add an active ability to each weapon, so we will get the input in the weapon class script. In the getInput function, add an elif to check if the action we just created has been pressed. The animation player has an animation called active ability and the weapon is not bossy. If these three conditions are met, we play the active ability animation of the animation player. Next, we are going to add this animation. I will add the active ability animation only to the sword weapon. You can do the same with the other weapons if you want. Select the animation player node of the sword and add the active ability animation. Make the animation however you like. I am going to make it off camera. Hey, I'm back. The active ability animation I did is like the normal attack but bigger. Also, I increased the damage by 1. Don't forget to reset all the changes on the cancel attack animation. Otherwise, if you are hit, the scale or the damage won't change to their default values. If you play the game now, the player will be able to attack using the active ability, but he can use it non-stop. We have to add a cooldown. We can add a cooldown effect easily using a timer. Add a timer in the weapon scene and change his name to cooldown timer. The WattTime property represents the cooldown time. I set it to 4 seconds. Enable the one-shot property to stop the timer automatically when the time reaches 0. If you don't enable it, the timer will loop forever. Open the weapon script again and add a boolean variable called canActiveAbility, for example, and initialize it to true. Also, add an onReady variable for the cooldown timer. Scroll down to the getInput function. Before performing the active ability, make sure that the canActiveAbility variable is true, and when we play the animation, set the variable to false and start the timer. Connect the timeout signal of the cooldown timer to the script. When the timer reaches 0, set the canActiveAbility variable to true. This way, the player will be able to unleash the active ability again after the cooldown finishes. Play the game again. The active ability is fully functional now, but we should add a visual representative to let the player know when he is able to use it again. For this purpose, I downloaded a pack of pixel art ability icons from Edge.io. Also, I added an icon all white to make the animation. To make the ability icon, add a canvas layer node in the weapon scene and rename it to UI. Add a texture progress node as his child to render the icon and make the recharge animation. Change his name to Ability Icon. Select the texture progress node and load the under texture, the icon, and the progress texture, the white icon. Set the tint of the progress texture to transparent gray. Switch the fill mode to the option you prefer. I personally have chosen the last option. It seems very cool. Scale and move the node as you like. In my case, I want it smaller and at the bottom left of the screen. You can play the game if you want to check how it looks. To animate the icon, we will use a twin. For that reason, add a twin node as a child of the canvas layer. Next, create a new script for the canvas layer and add an onReady variable for the ability icon and twin nodes. Below, implement a function with the name recharge ability animation and a time parameter that contains the time the animation should last. Inside the function, interpolate using the twin the value of the ability icon node from 100 to 0 in the time the parameter indicates. Finally, start the twin. I stored the result of the twin functions in a variable and I use assert to make sure that there aren't any errors and avoid some annoying warnings. Go back to the weapon class script and add an onReady variable for the Y node. Below the line where we start the cooldown timer, call the recharge ability animation function of the Y variable we just created and use the Y time of the timer as the parameter. This way, the cooldown and the animation will have the same duration. Maybe all the weapons won't have active ability, so we have to hide the ability icon in the weapon class and make it visible only on the weapons who have it. For that reason, remove the under texture of the ability icon node and change each value to 0. Finally, open the scene of the weapon you want to have an active ability and add the icon you want on the under texture of the ability icon node. You can put different icons and cooldown times for each weapon. Play the game and try the new active ability. When the player uses the active ability, the twin interpolates the value of the icon's texture progress, pointing out the remaining time before the ability can be used again. We only have one problem. When we switch weapons, the ability's icon is not hidden or shown. It seems that the canvas layer does not have a show and hide functions, so we will have to override them in the weapon class to manually hide and show the icon. Open the weapon class script one last time and add an onReady variable for the ability icon node. At the bottom of the script, create a new function called show that hides the ability icon node and calls the parent class show function. We need to call the show function of the parent class to show all the other nodes automatically. This way, we don't need to show all the nodes individually, only the ability icon. To call a function of the parent class that has the same name as one of its class functions, we simply put a dot before the function. Do the same for the hide function. But we have another bug. The game crashes when we go to the next floor. To fix it, we only need to move the weapon hide function after adding the weapon as a child in the restore previous state function. It seems that the ability icon is null because the nodes of the weapon are not initialized until we add the scene as a child. Now, yes, the active ability works perfectly. When we change weapons, the icon is shown or hidden accordingly. And that's all for today. I hope you liked the video and see you in the next one.